Good morning, everybody. Don Ketterhagen here with another interview with a really interesting lady, and her name is Kaye Wagner. Hi, Kaye.
Hi,
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good.
Good, good. I read an interesting blog yesterday from a physician out in California talking about the best patient and the best physician. And his blog basically said that the patient is the best physician. What do you think about that?
I think that it is very true, especially in my case. After being diagnosed with type 1 at age 46, I had no other choice but to really learn about the disease, learn about the problems, everything that goes along with it. And I had to really begin to listen to my body.
Well, that's what he said. And one of the things that physicians commonly will hear is when things are so bad that it's fairly easy to make some diagnosis.
Mhm.
However, if they look back, or at least the patient looks back 2, 4, 6 months earlier, where
Mhm.
there's some subtle signs that you would recognize and a physician probably wouldn't.
I did, and frankly, that's exactly what happened to me. I was diagnosed June of 2000, but December of 99, just a few months before, I started to, number one, gain weight just around the middle.
Really?
And I knew it was not overeating related because I've never been one to overeat. And I just kept gaining and nothing else was going on. But I knew it was not normal. So when I actually had my physical, my yearly physical that May, which was May of 2000, I said I was having this weight gain that was sudden, and being tall and fairly thin, it was in my middle only, and I
Right,
knew it
right.
wasn't right. And what I was told was because I was 46, it was nothing to be concerned about. It was that typical middle age weight gain that was going on. I accepted it, but I still did not really buy that. And frankly, it was a month later that I um, started to have excessive thirst, and it was a sudden onset.
Some of the classic symptoms of diabetes didn't
Yes,
didn't hit till
no,
after you had seen a physician. He had no clue at that point in time.
no clue. And unfortunately, nothing else for that showed up in my blood work. Of course, there was no reason at that time to test for it, and
Hemoglobin A1C you're talking about.
exactly the A1C. And I had acute onset,
That's
and that was
interesting.
and in that time where I became about a week before was actually when the frequent thirst started, when the having to go to the bathroom started, and then I suddenly dropped weight, and then the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital.
Wow. That's an interesting story. So 6 months ahead of time, something
Mhm.
was going on with your
Yes,
body, and you were aware of it, but
yes,
not to the point where you could make a diagnosis, nor could
no,
your physician even a month before you had the classical symptoms.
that's right,
How have
that's
you
right.
done so far since that time?
How have I done?
Well,
Well, 14 years later, I would have to say I've done well, but it has not been without a lot of complications in that it's still a learning process. I probably about after a year into it was when I was labeled not just a type 1 diabetic, but a brittle diabetic,
wow. Even
meaning that no matter how good I was with the diet and the insulin, and it was just difficult to control.
this is not the classical type 1 diabetic either. And,
No.
most classically, historically, this shows up in a lot younger age group.
Yes. Hmm.
Is there any family history?
I have family history on my dad's side. I had a cousin who was diagnosed when she was about 3, and I can't remember if she was 5 or 6 years older. There was a lot of family history with type 2 on my dad's side as well.
But
But
that's not what
but
you
that's
had.
not, and that's where a lot of people get very confused. It's type 1 is basically the autoimmune um,
Correct.
issue. So, but I did have one cousin who was diagnosed at 3. But to be diagnosed at 46, it happens. It's just not as common.
So what would you advise people that are maybe being told by their physicians, their family practitioner, their internist, their gynecologist that, I'm worried that I'm gaining weight,
Mhm.
rather than having them give you a pat on the back and say
Yeah.
everything's fine, it's just the
Yeah.
hormones or it's just your age. What kinds of tests would you insist upon,
Well, I would insist upon the urine test, of course, to detect sugar.
right?
And then the test for the A1C to see what your levels might be for the 3 months. The glucose, which I don't think is very pleasant, but I didn't have to do that because I just simply ended up in the hospital one day.
Right, you didn't need to drink the glucose.
No, in fact, when I arrived, um, I was actually very close to a diabetic coma, and they actually said she's diabetic, and I was aware enough to say,
Can't be.
no, I'm not. They said, yes, we detect it on your breath. And that was all it took. But what would I say? I really, especially women who
Right.
find themselves with that weight gain with no explanation. There is an explanation.
Just got to look for it.
You've got to look for it.
What are some of the things that you've done to reverse that weight gain? I know you're in an exercise program right
I,
now.
I, Donna, I'm still working on that. That has been a constant issue. I had put some weight back on when it finally happened due to the middle age, the premenopausal years, and difficult to get off. So it was about 3 years ago, not ever having been athletic, my doctor said, okay, I'm going to write you a prescription. You need to get to a gym and exercise. And that's when it started. And
Started to
it
come off.
yes, and it really came off that first time fairly quickly. I did get a trainer for the first time. He was educated in diabetes as well, and I worked with him about 6 months, and it came off. And and
Great.
and it was not easy for me. I have never been athletic, but I really had no choice. But the best thing about it was I saw a tremendous improvement in my blood sugars. Um, I was always experiencing high blood sugars and then the crash and then the backup called the rebound. And my blood sugars for the first time improved greatly. And I would say that's for anybody,
Right, right.
but it really was the best thing I could do. And then I went through the weight gain again, all during this time as well. A lot of stress is involved.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because you mentioned the autoimmune
Yes.
component of your disease, and you have no control over that. There's
No.
another component that you told me about, and that's the stress factor, which often you don't have any control over either, but that's something in addition to diet and exercise that you can manage. What have you found with the emotional component of diabetes?
Uh, it's been hard because stress stress is hard on everyone, but when you are diabetic, when that stress hormone starts to dump, all it takes is a slight trigger, and it starts dumping, and typically the blood sugars go up.
Explain that a little bit for our audience. What do you mean by the dumping effect of your cortisol?
Well, it's that it's really for everybody, but it's that flight fight or flight syndrome.
Right.
And it's that natural feeling that we feel when fear or anxiety comes on, and that's just part of our makeup. That's when the stress hormone just literally starts to dump.
How,
And
how'd you handle that?
how do you handle that? I'm still learning how to handle that.
Aren't we all?
uh, I'm learning to take a deep breath, step back, and that doesn't always work. But the thing about being diabetic, it just takes a slight trigger. And just from the standpoint of also being diabetic, Don, just the day-to-day care, period, is stressful.
Sure.
It for me, it's a 24-hour job. And I really have had to fight to come back and not let it define me. And people are amazed sometimes to know that I'm walking around with this. I also only went on the insulin pump um, not quite 2 years ago. I'm almost there, but that was also a life changer for me.
Was that kind
That,
of a godsend
yeah,
thing? Big
absolutely,
difference? Tell
a
tell me how.
huge difference.
Tell me how that improved things.
Well, I went from having to give myself injections before every meal and every snack. Um, but I did that for years. The pump is just like having a working pancreas. It's just on the outside of my body, and I get a drip 24 hours a day, and then it's so easy. I on the insulin shots, it's still counting carbs, but
Sure.
it was never exact.
It's much more
So
exact.
it was never exact. So I was having more of the highs and the lows. You just never know. The pump, when I sit down and see what I'm eating, I put in the number of carbs that I'm going to eat. It calculates it. There's very little error.
That's nice.
So I have improved greatly on the pump, but on the other side of the coin, when I first started wearing it, nobody told me that it was going to put some weight on me.
Oh, really?
Because I was still at this time in my life, middle aged, so to speak, um, only used to insulin at the time I was eating.
Right.
Now I'm getting excess insulin every hour on the hour, 24/7, plus the insulin for the eating. And if my blood sugar would go high, then I had to do correction doses. So then there's more insulin, and the insulin was putting weight on me.
Just the
That
learning curve. I'm sure you've got that pretty much under control
I
now.
do. And frankly, the best thing right now, it's back to exercise.
Tell me more. How is that possible with your pump? Do you disconnect it or
No, no,
keep?
I just snap it on. It's always with me. If I should start out a little bit, I test before I do any exercise. If I start out a little on the low side, I'll just suspend it for the time I'm exercising. Um, I'll eat a snack before. I mean, um,
You just recently told me that your trainer also
mhm,
has a pump. Tell me about
yes,
that. That's over at John Bates's
addicted to
Addicted to
Yes.
Fitness. Yeah.
Addicted to fitness. Well, that was another amazing thing. I had been reading John's daily posts, and I had not been working out since the beginning of the summer, and I just slowly saw the weight coming back on, and I knew I had to get moving again. And one morning I saw a post he put on that it's not about perfection, it's about progress, because I actually backed off because I wasn't seeing any progress, and I needed to get back to training because I'm accountable. When I know I've got an appointment, I've got to be there. And he said, I have the perfect person for you. And she walked in and he introduced me and he said, and she wears the insulin pump. So the trainer she's been diagnosed since she was 8 years old. She's been on the pump for quite a long time. And the thing that was so wonderful about that is I have still not come into a relationship with someone who 100% knows what I deal with every day.
Right.
I belong to a pump support group, a chat room, and we talk, and it's very nice, and I've learned a lot too that I didn't learn in pump education. But to have somebody that even my own specialist said, even I cannot fully understand where you are. Nobody really can understand what you deal with day to day, morning till night, unless they've walked in your shoes.
Right.
So, and she walks, and we started working together last week, and that's actually been a really good thing for me to have somebody that she's an inspiration because I see that I can get to that goal where I want to be again.
Well, that's incredible, and I'm sure you're a positive reinforcement to her for what
Mhm.
she's doing.
Yes,
Eh,
yes,
So you've got your online group. Are there other
yes.
local groups in Naples, Fort Myers area?
You know, I don't know if there are support groups for those who are on the pump because they're just a lot of those who are on the pump were probably diagnosed as children.
Sure.
You know that there's going to be more adults that you find with type 2, and that's a totally different reason. When I was first diagnosed, this was very interesting. When I was first diagnosed and started going to my diabetic education class, there was a lot to learn. I mean, and this goes back to the article you read about you're your best physician. I had to learn so much. I almost felt like I was in medical school, and I've got a file. Every time there was something in the newspaper or a magazine regarding research, I mean, I clip and read everything. And I remember going for one of my checkups, and there was a new poster about a diabetic support group that met when, and I talked to my physician at the time, Dr. Case. He actually advised me not to go.
Really?
And
Why?
he said, in your case, he said, they're most type twos. And also at that time, we didn't have any children, juvenile diabetic care in Naples. They had to drive to Fort Myers or Miami. He said, I'll tell you why. I think since you are so newly diagnosed, I believe it will make you more depressed to go
Really?
than to learn on your own and gradually, learn about the disease yourself. Um, because these groups tend to talk about all the bad things and not really,
Look at the positive.
not look at the positive side. And I did hit after, I would say shortly after my diagnosis, I'll be honest, I really hit what is expected. I hit the wall, which was a lot of anger.
So kind of like the process of grief that people go through
Yes,
when they have a death or a major illness
it
that's
yes,
terminal.
it was grief. It truly was because having been a healthy person up to that point, and it's a little different when a child is diagnosed. They're very very young, and it's devastating. And these little children are my heroes, and but they grow up with it. They grow up not being able to indulge in
Right.
whatever they want to. I was 46 and I'm from Kentucky, and I was used to cooking and eating whatever I wanted and baking, and I remember the first Thanksgiving after the diagnosis. I really was a mess. I was very angry, and because one day you feel like you're normal, and then the next day, in a way, a life of you that you've known, it's no more
It died.
overnight.
Yep.
And I experienced a lot of anger, and then I went through the gamut of what's expected, depression as well.
Sure. It seems like you've recovered very nicely, and you're born again, living a new life. And what's your normal day like?
My normal day, the first thing I do in the morning before I get out of the bed is I test my blood sugar. And I'm very happy when I've got a good reading in the morning.
You know it's going to
Sometimes
be a good day.
yeah, then I know it's a good day. Now, yesterday I actually got up and it was 52, and I was like, oh boy, okay, this is going to be half the morning of getting myself back to feeling good and getting out and about. So basically, it's testing my blood sugar the first thing I do in the morning. Then I have time that I really enjoy and relax in the morning with my coffee. I don't work out of the home, so I have obviously I have no children at home anymore. I just do what I want to do, but now the gym has got to be a part of my day.
Well, I'm sure that it's been a real positive thing that you look forward to doing. How many times a
Yeah.
week do you go?
Well, I just joined Addicted to Fitness about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm my goal right now is no less than 3 times a week. If I can make it four, I'm doing great. Uh, John said it's very important, and I've been through this before with other trainers, that it's not just the cardio, which cardio is really important for me being type 1 diabetic, but the strength training, the weight training is also really important, because the other thing we have to fight, not just a diabetic, but women, men too, but mostly women, is the osteoporosis deal. We need
Correct.
some strength training to battle that. And really, this is my job. And
It's a
I did
full-time
tell,
job.
it's a full-time job, and it goes back to what you started your interview with. It's being my own best physician, and this is my job. And it's kind of an odd statement, but I made this to a friend the other day, and I said, of course I wish I had not ever received this diagnosis, but I did. And there are really times that in some ways it may be a blessing.
I think
I
it
don't
is.
want it. I don't like to have it, but I would never have I really don't believe I would have ever had pursued regular exercise, because I never had before. And for anybody, I don't think I would have ever been really that conscious about how much I ate. And I had the metabolism years ago where I was one that could eat anything and
Anything?
everything and not put weight on. Well, that changes when you get older. And if I had not had to really focus on what I eat and how many carbs and what's good and what's not, um, there's no telling what I would look like today.
Well,
And
you look great, and not only the things that you mentioned, but I think you're an inspiration to other people. There are those out there that don't cope as well as you, or have developed the mechanisms to get in control of your life. And I think for all of those reasons that I really appreciate your doing this interview with us. I think you're an inspiration to others, and it's been really, really good for others. I'm going to come
well,
back and do another interview after you've been with John for a couple of
okay,
months and see how it's
yeah,
going. I'm sure you'll pick up more bits of information to share. And I
I'm
think the
working on it.
takeaway for everybody in talking with you is that be your own physician.
Yeah.
Don't change that ever, because you're the best.
And I do want to say though, Don, it's not been easy. It's not been without some really difficult times. I mean, depression did set in at one point because, as you mentioned, there was a loss, and that's also something I want to say to be aware of when you feel that that sense of darkness come on. That's also something that's very important to address. Um, and it's a work in progress. I'm so glad that I walked into Addicted to Fitness and then end up with a trainer who is also a pumper, and it's all good.
It's
It's all
all
good.
good. Well, I want
Mhm.
to thank you very much, and my audience thanks you. I want you to have a great day,
Thank
and
you
once
too.
again, thank you so much for being with us today.
It was so good to see you. Have a
Bye.
good day.